Hello and welcome to Get It Started, Get It Done, the Banyan Security podcast covering the security industry and beyond. In this episode, our host and Banyan's Chief Security Officer, Den Jones, speaks with FBI Special Agent Scott Hellman. Scott has been investigating cybercrime with the FBI for more than 14 years and shares with us some of the key threats facing organizations in 2023. We hope you enjoyed Den's discussion with Scott Hellman.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to what I think is now episode 14 of Get It Started, Get It Done, Banyan's lame attempt at podcasting. Or maybe if we don't do well selling software, then we're going to have to fall back on this one. So glad our software is good, I guess. I'm Dan Jones, the host, and today I've got Scott Hellman from the FBI. We're going to talk a little bit about cyber security from 2022, what happened, any observations they had, as well as 2023 and how can you protect yourself and engage with the FBI. So Scott, welcome to the show. I'd love for everyone's benefit, can you introduce yourself so I don't butcher it?
Sure, absolutely. As you mentioned, you got my name right, Scott Hellman. I'm a special agent or supervisory special agent with the FBI. I've been in for about 15 years. And I sit in Silicon Valley in South Bay of San Francisco Bay Area and lead a team of cyber investigators.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, this is one of those easy conversations, I guess, especially for you guys. 2022 was an interesting year. It's hard to summarize it in 5 or 10 minutes, but could you share just a little bit about the themes of 22, what you guys were seeing and that kind of thing?
Well, absolutely. Just one thing to touch on. I know, as you and I have talked before, that you talked with my boss, Elvis Chan, in a previous episode. And so I think one thing that's going to be very different about talking with me versus talking to Elvis is that I love haggis. And Elvis did not. I had a neighbor back when I lived in Virginia who was Scottish and introduced me to two things. One was a proper Scotch, and the other was haggis. And it was I had never had it before, and it was during Burns night. So we had a blast. So I think that's going to be at least one major.
That is one difference. Yeah, and I'll tell you. I hear people all the time, they kind of think haggis is crap, or they're scared of it. They're even just scared of the thought of it.
Yeah.
But yet there's so many cultures that have like a blood sausage pudding or something of that similar nature. And I think it all generates from the use of the sheep's stomach, or the lining, which, these days, not a lot of people really do that. But if you get a traditional haggis from Scotland, then yeah, you're getting the full experience, and with a good drink, I would say it's probably a better experience.
It was pretty fantastic.
Awesome. So let's jump in. So 22 was a bizarre year, or maybe a busy year. So do you want to share some of the thoughts and the insights that you guys had on this?
Sure. I think I'll touch on three things that really come to mind. And the first is we saw a lot of non-technical workarounds to MFA, as of course, multi-factor auth has been pushed so hard in the last, maybe 5 to 10 by both security professionals like yourself and from public industry like us when we're talking about best practices. Over time, it has become adopted very ubiquitously across a wide range of internet services. And of course, cyber criminals have to figure out ways to get around that. And it is relatively, I think, challenging to take a technical approach to getting around multi-factor auth, compromising keys and that thought. And so the mechanism that they've chosen more often than not is some sort of social engineering approach, whether it's a direct social engineering with an employee that has access to keys, or social engineering to convince someone to click on, a multi-factor prompt. We've also seen a lot of SIM swapping to gain access to people's phones through 2022. And it's certainly, I wouldn't say unique to 22, but it is something that continues to increase. And so that would be the first thing, is I've seen a lot of social engineering. Maybe just a quick story, if I can throw one out there.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So we had a victim company give us a call and basically had an internal, let's say, help desk style employee. They received a call from someone claiming to be HR. And basically they said, hey, Den, whatever the person's, I'll just use your name. Hey, Den, my name's Scott. I'm calling from HR. And unfortunately, someone has reported that you have posted racist statements in an online forum. And I think it is such an interesting choice because there's been so much additional awareness about, I think, racial sensitivity and thought in the last multiple years, that I'm thinking about how I would feel if I were approached with that situation. And, people that I talk to about this is that you're immediately so tunnel visioned on, oh my gosh, it has to be, some sort of mistake, but this is a serious problem that I'm going to have to deal with immediately. And so it brings that sort of sense of urgency to the situation. And of course, the next piece of the social engineering was, look, I'm sure that this is just a mistake. And this is probably pretty easy to fix, but we've got to investigate all of these things. And, the laptop you're using right now, it's a company laptop. All the things you signed when you first came on, basically we have the right to gain access to that laptop. So we're going to send you this link. We're going to do a quick remote access and just take a quick peek around for any evidence of, the words that were claimed to be used, this, that, and the other thing. Hours later, when the employee finally realizes this is not reality, it's far too late, and 5 million pieces of PII are out the door. So
yeah, wow.
I just think that's a particularly interesting one. We saw this in the last one.
Yeah, and it's funny because, and I think one of the calls I was on with Elvis, he does this kind of weekly call thing with the team and stuff. And one of the calls, he was sharing, somebody I think was sharing that conversation. And I was like, shit, yeah, this is like, you're getting to a point where the social engineering is becoming so good that as humans, we can be trained on what not to do and what to do.
Yeah.
But the adversaries are getting so clever because half of them know what we're being trained on anyway. It's like, oh, check the from email address, or check this, or check the spelling. And
for sure,
it's like, holy crap, but that's the basics. And they've gone far beyond the basics. So it's as you say, creating the sense of urgency with something which in our society has become a moralistic thing and big topic. It's huge, So yeah, it's a shame, I think the thing for us is, always validate and call back the HR team or something like that in this scenario, right?
Yeah.
And I just, it's funny, yesterday I'm selling something on Marketplace.
Oh, don't even get started. I was just
the guy
myself.
Yeah, so it's funny, I'm selling an antique clock, and I've been caught out in a scam on this one. And I remember telling Elvis about it, and he's just like, oh my God, yeah, there's nothing you can do. And ultimately it was like, pay this to get the ship in, or do this. And do
they
that.
overpaid you to get the money back.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Now, luckily enough, Venmo recouped the funds, but yesterday some guy reaches out and he's like, I'm going to Zelle you some money. And I'm like, cool. I said, the money has to clear before I'll allow pickup.
I feel like you guys read my mind, Dan, in the last 2 days.
He's like, I've just emailed you. So I'll look at my email, but I'm in my bank account and I'm looking at Zelle in my bank account. I'm like, the money's not arrived.
Nope.
And then I see this email and it's instantly Google Mail or Hotmail, whichever one I was using, caught the email as spam and threw it in my junk folder. And I just looked and I glanced at it. And I took the screenshot and I sent it to the guy and I went, clearly a scam. I went, you need to improve on how you're doing this. And but it came from a random Gmail account, and it had all the Zelle stuff looking great. And
sure.
if you weren't a paranoid security person, you might have been like, cool, and let me click the link in the email to validate the money transferred.
Absolutely.
Like, geez, yeah.
It's frustrating beyond belief.
Yeah, it happens. So 22. I mean, it's funny because there was a lot of friends of mine in companies that I respect and stuff had some issues and stuff. And I think it doesn't matter now. You can have a great security organization. You can invest millions and millions and millions. And we're playing Russian roulette because ultimately all it takes is one employee to click a link. And then that could be the start of it.
Well, I mean, you bring up, I think, another piece, which is you've talked about, basics, you've talked about training. But I think, and this is maybe a piece that you were planning on talking about later, but I think it feels pretty organic to talk about it now, is when you're talking about social engineering, you're talking about phishing, you really need both, I think, to explore both technical solutions and looking at human training and awareness campaigns. You absolutely need both. You can't have one without the other. If you don't have enough technical tools to reduce the footprint of the malicious emails that are getting in front of your people, your statistics are going to be too high of it's just too likely that someone's going to click on something more often.
Yeah.
And so your tools, the various ones that are, there's many of them out there. And obviously we can't endorse any one particular tool, but tools that are designed to reduce, let's say, the number of phishing emails that end up in front of an employee's face, you're still going to have some that get through.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Make sure that your employees are being routinely just, drilled about thinking, having that really needs to be in the forefront of their mind. And it's a very challenging problem because we're all being tasked to do more with less all the time. I don't care what industry you're in.
Yeah.
That's it. It's right. We're going to do more work with less resource. And at some point, you get overwhelmed with a million emails in your inbox and you're getting pinged on Slack, you're getting pinged, on whatever platform. And it becomes really difficult to stay present and paying attention to what you're doing in the moment. And think about, you get to the end of the day and you're tired and you're like, I got to crank through these last 40 emails quickly so I can get to, I don't know if you have children, but my child's game or whatever it's going to be. And that, I think, is where we're most susceptible, is we're not really engaged in what we're doing in that moment. We're not being present. And I talk about it a bunch. It's presence has come up a lot in the last multiple years. COVID was so intense and still is in many respects. And people are just, their mind is somewhere else. And thinking about how that plays a role in just reading email and phishing, I think, is just a really interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, and it's for us, we engage with a lot of customers and a lot of prospects on where in the supply chain or the kill chain is a company like Banyan going to help, but where do we not help? So from a defense in depth strategy, there's no one vendor that's going to do it all. So from a vendor scenario, and it's funny because I got a slide deck that I've put together for conferences I'm presenting at this year.
Yep.
And I'm so last year I spent a lot of time talking about zero trust. And then, it's a nice buzzword, if you're playing buzzword bingo, brilliant. But this year, it's all about the why. Why do you want to do something like that? How are we being attacked? Yeah. And then how and where may these kind of principles help you thwart the attacks?
That's right.
Because like you say, if you kind of think of it like the email comes in, you click the link.
Yep.
Well, we've been working on like DNS and URL filtering. There's many companies that do stuff like that, so that when you click the link, it's not going to go there, right?
Right.
And or passwordless or device registration or device posture, all of these things for us, they're things that we've been working on for a while and talking to customers about, because the reality is some of these attacks, if you've got the right strategy from a defense in depth perspective, you can certainly reduce it. I'd never tell anybody you can eliminate it, but you could certainly reduce it. And now 2023, Scott, where do you see, so do you just see a much of the same continuation of 22, or any surprising new thoughts that you guys are coming up with?
I think it's a combination of, maybe not surprising, but so it's going to be some more of the same. We're going to see more ransomware. We're going to see more hack and exfil and extortion as sort of a, not replacement, but an addition to ransomware. Just seeing more of that because it's, I think, maybe a little bit easier to hack and steal and then try and extort in exchange for not leaking as opposed to going through more iterations of trying to encrypt and go through the infrastructure you need, even as a criminal organization, to manage keys and things like that. I think we're certainly going to see more phishing. 300,000 phishing reports we had in this past year. That's going to continue to be high. BEC continues to be on the rise. From 2017, we had, let's say, $1.7 billion in loss from BEC. Then 1.8 billion in 2019. I think, so 1.7 in 2018, 1.8 in 2019. I'm probably missing the numbers here. Anyway, in 2021, it was 2.4 billion. That's the key piece there, is this huge jump. And then we've got 2.75 in 2022. And I think about why we might have that huge jump during COVID and how COVID may have played a role. And I think you think about phishing and BEC and how, part of the reason why it works is creating this sense of urgency, like we just talked about, having this change in business practice where we're asking someone to send money to point B instead of point A. And then oftentimes the sense of confidentiality in many phishing emails. Look, Dan, this is really important. I'm trusting you with this information. You can't tell anybody about it. And you think about what was happening during COVID, and you've got all of those things, a constant sense of urgency. Like, Dan, you got to run out and get some toilet paper before it's gone. Or run out.
We've done, so I was going to say, we get, like, our CEO, like most executives in companies. It's funny. It always surprised me how executives are like, oh, I don't want to do the blah, blah, blah thing that everyone's been told to do from a security perspective. They don't want to do it because they're too cool for cats. Mm-hmm. But yet they're the ones that are on the high value target list because they usually have some great juicy stuff to steal. And our team often get text messages or emails masquerading as the CEO
all the time
that I'm at a conference and need your urgent help, blah blah blah.
It's right now. It has to be right now.
Yeah, always a sense of urgency.
Yeah, so like those things combine, right? They match up nicely with each other. There's urgency, the constant change. Like we were changing nonstop through COVID, so people kind of got used to an expected change. And then this sense of confidentiality. Like, what better way to prevent people from saying, like, "Hey, Dan, did you get the same email that I got?" Because it used to be, if you're in person, you stick your head over a cube wall.
Yeah,
had a little bit of friction of everyone being isolated in their homes. I think probably, I can't say for certain, but I look at those factors and I think, man, that made phishing and BEC just that much more effective.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's really going to continue to be huge, which we saw in 2022, is a lot more crypto theft, loads of it, and use of crypto. And then for sure, AI being used on both attack and defense. No question. I think that's going to be really interesting to see how AI continues to be used to craft malware or whatever it's going to be, as well as being used on the defense side to protect against it.
Yeah, and I certainly, from an AI perspective, it seems like in the last 6 months, but definitely in the last month, I've heard a lot more about AI being used to write code, to execute code, to make decisions about code writing. And it's getting pretty alarming just on how rapidly that's advancing,
For sure.
Yeah, I used to think about IoT. When I worked in Adobe, one of the teams that were responsible for all of the collaboration spaces, I go in, he's giving me the tour of the space. He's like, yeah, Dan, look at these lights and look at this and look at this. And he went, and that's on the network, and this is this. And I'm just like, oh shit. And I'm like you're just bringing in stuff. So we started to kind of work with that team just on how could we look at the tech that they were bringing in from an IoT perspective.
Sure.
Because you're dropping it. Now, the other thing was, well, could we create a separate network segment just for this IoT classification of devices, which we were doing with facilities and some of those teams.
It's almost like a dirty network because it's coming up so fast. Who has the time to sort of to vet these things out to see what's going on? It's like, I just had 64 light bulbs into my house.
Yeah, but then the hard thing is they want their laptop or tablet to connect to other devices. that are, a similar classification, and it was just a gnarly, a gnarly thing. Now in 2023, so we talked a little bit about guidance for people to keep themselves safe or to protect themselves more. So I'll rattle off a few things that we always think of. Passwordless is great. MFA's table stakes. I mean, for me, that was the table stakes 10 years ago. But MFA, passwordless. I like the thought because it plays well with our company story, which is, device posture and even a registered device. Mm-hmm. So the one thing is you can't log in as me from China because you're not on my devices and I've registered them. So I like that.
That's right.
I love getting rid of VPNs. I mean, I've been talking about that for many years now because VPNs usually give full access to a network, and that's never clever. So
what you're saying? Get rid of VPNs. What's your alternative then? Is just only use cloud services, and so you're going direct to the service?
Well, no. So the cool thing, and it's funny. So in 2017, my Adobe Enterprise Security team, we done a Zero Trust project there. We called it Zero Trust Enterprise Network, and we took all the internal applications and we put them behind a reverse proxy. In those days, we used F5 APMs. Now Adobe shifted to use Banyan's product, which is kind of cool. But ultimately, you're publishing the app, the service to the internet and making that accessible, but behind a bunch of security stuff. So you've got other controls that protect against cross-site scripting or other security issues that are pretty common. And the cool thing about that is you didn't then, and we done this before COVID. So the great thing is when COVID hit, 40,000 people went and worked from home and they didn't VPN in. They were still using the apps that we published via our Zen platform. But in order to access the app, you had to have a registered device.
Sure.
You had to meet a minimum security posture.
Right.
And you had to have a certificate and not use a username and password. So we were doing cert-based auth with MFA, with device posture and the registered device. Then you get in and you're still going through the firewalls and the layers of security, but you're not accessing the whole network. All you're doing is you're only accessing the apps we publish. The other thing, and why we shifted to Banyan is because sometimes you actually just want to access a lab, like a small subnet, or sometimes you want to access servers or infrastructure. Like we had our Bastion hosts, and you'd go in and you could access a Bastion host, and then from there go to infrastructure. So extra layers. But because we removed the VPN stuff and the password stuff, it made the friction a lot simpler. It's a really smooth experience for the users.
Well, I guess obviously the frictions on the front end is getting it set up. That's where all the horsepower is going to be is getting that infrastructure set up so that.
Well, the good news. I mean, the Adobe story. We done it in 7 months. I mean, that was from ideation to POC to full 40,000 deployment, 2,000 apps.
That's pretty amazing.
And all we had to do was, I mean, we done integrations with Okta and some of the other stuff, but the F5 APMs, we put them in AWS VPC. So with Banyan though, I mean, we done a customer in a week, the other week. I mean, we with a customer, and that was like 10,000 users in a week. Because you can put the reverse proxy technology, the gateway thing, as a cloud service. It's a hardened appliance. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, so I don't drown everyone with Kool-Aid nonsense. What do you see? I mean, what do you think people should be thoughtful of from a strategy perspective as they go into 2013 and try and deal with these attacks?
I'm just going to go back. I'm going to go back to basics because I think not every company is going to have necessarily the resources to have such a robust security posture that you just described. And so I see still plenty of intrusions occurring from a compromise of basics, right? So making sure that your basics are buttoned up.
Yeah.
From a smaller or medium-sized company standpoint, those are things that are still very accessible to you. We're talking about password management, just like you mentioned, patch management, and basic. We're talking about employee training. We still see three of the main vectors for most intrusions are going to be compromised credentials from somewhere, right? We're talking about exploitation of known vulnerabilities. So that's going to be patch management, and phishing. And that's going to be a combination of, again, technical and sort of human training. And we're talking about defense in depth. Those are just like the bare minimum that I think, again, are very accessible to most companies to find a solution that's within reach.
Yeah.
Those.
And it is funny because I talk to so many people about the basics, and it's alarming. I think Elvis shared something with me a while last year about stats on companies in the Bay Area that haven't fully MFA'd themselves.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, that's an alarming number of people. And all I said to Elvis, well, at least I've got job security because I've spent 25 years doing identity and access management and stuff. So I feel fine there, but I'm alarmed. I'm alarmed that the companies that haven't fully done this, and because if they haven't done it for their basic employees, then what's their stance on privileged? I mean, if you kind of think about it, it's like, have they only done privileged and not the rest of the employees? I mean,
sure.
So I'd be nervous for some of those guys, but yeah, the basics. I think there's too many companies haven't taken care of just the basics, and spread themselves thin. Because I think when people think of I'll do a security program, they're like, right, let's do incident management, vulnerability management, blah 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 blah.
Too much.
You go through the whole thing, and you can't do it all.
No, that's a huge endeavor. You bring up the perfect point, which is you can't do it all, but you've got to start somewhere. And it almost doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of arguments where you should start. It matters more to start than it does to spend an incredible period of time trying to lay the whole thing out ahead and have nothing in place or very few things in place. Get started. Yeah. I'm sure like any other company, nobody starts with the roadmap from the very beginning and just lays it out and gets it done.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the title of the podcast is Get It Started, Get It Done. And it's like, for me, it's like, you can't procrastinate all the time on this stuff. You have to start somewhere. And then, especially in the Valley, right, there's a lot of consensus driven. Nobody wants to offend anybody and all that nonsense. And I get it, but that's only slowing down progress and wasting your resource time. So what was really funny for me was at Adobe, we had a small team of people that led this. I mean, it was only like 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
And I increased my headcount by 1, and I spent like $220,000. It wasn't a huge endeavor. And if you look at the financial benefit for people not changing their passwords every 90 days and people not VPNing in, it was huge, So it easily paid for itself, within 6 months of us deploying this. It's pretty cool.
My question for you on that is what's the sort of analog then, even for a medium or a smaller company is not going to have 220 grand laying around to do that. What's your thought process of where smaller medium companies should start?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's funny because we have talked to some companies about doing, an assessment or even like security strategy assessments, but a zero trust readiness assessment, all those kind of things. And I think in a smaller company, the important thing is look at the technology you have and look at the areas where you can spend less time and money. Because if you're only half-arsely doing vulnerability management and you're not really scanning and you've not really configured the thing, it's like, well, is that really the thing saving your bacon? Divert resources and funds over elsewhere. The good thing is, we're trying to, we focus on the small medium market actually. So this is the audience that you're talking about, and we talk to customers a lot about this. We are, and many of the other companies in this market, they're not very expensive, But the total cost of ownership, I think, is the thing that lets a lot of companies down. So the conversation we have internally is how do we make the total cost of ownership of our product as low as it possibly can be, so that you can install it and you're not catering and feeding it with 10 people. Like you kind of need you need the ability to say, look, I'm not going to increase my head count. I can do this with the team I have, and I'm maybe going to spend 5 hours a week less elsewhere.
Sure.
But literally, I've done 2 implementations, different technology stacks, and it's all focused on users accessing resources and services. And the biggest thing is find a really small use case. And for a company that's less than 50 people, we actually offer a free product. So I think some other companies out there probably do something similar, but less than 50, it's like, come on, let's get it going. And maybe all you've got is a team in your company that you want to protect them more, and it's less than 50. Go have at it,
Sure.
So yeah, and I think the big thing, going back to protecting people and stuff is, MFA, do the basics, and really train your employees, but then also recognize that they're going to be caught out at some point. So if that point is where they're going to click the link, then what can you put in place to prevent that going somewhere? And we're focused a lot on all of that stuff. And the big thing for me in 2017, what I realized was employees are not all in your office. They're not all on your network.
Yeah.
So if they're going to be home, they're going to be traveling, and then some or more of your apps are cloud-based. So that was a big thing for us. And we were watching how we were being attacked, and then trying to think of strategies to thwart those attacks. And that's where that investment really came into it. So as we wrap up, Scott, first of all, I really appreciate your time. But FBI, you guys, and I know this because I've worked with you guys quite a bit, but you guys have got a great outreach program. You're really trying to work with industry. Do you want to share a little bit about that and where that's gone?
Sure, absolutely. So here in the Bay Area, we've got a private sector engagement team, and their job, of course, is just to continue to develop and foster relationships with a wide range of entities, not just tech, of course, in the Bay Area. But I think one of the most important things any entity can do, small, medium, if we're talking about businesses, is just reach out to their local FBI office and develop a relationship with people like me, someone who is helping to lead a team of cyber investigators, because for a couple of reasons. One, you don't want that first conversation to be when your hair's on fire and you're thinking about including law enforcement in the process, in the incident response, but you don't have any relationship. You have no idea what it's going to look like. So you want to be able to have that conversation much earlier, right? Before an event happens. Also, it makes it very helpful. Many times we'll come across pieces of intelligence through other investigations where we can identify, oh gosh, it looks like company X is next on the target list for whatever flavor of ransomware. And if I got that relationship already with you, I can pick up the phone and just give you a call directly and say, hey, I've got this, source and dest IPs from these ports, and this is kind of what we're seeing. Hopefully it's something you're able to do something with. I think that's really what it comes down to, is developing the relationship early so that you have some additional options and you're not trying to make a decision at the point of duress.
Yeah, and the one thing for me over the years, I've had Elvis come in Adobe. We were doing our Insider Threat program. I had Elvis come in and talk to the team just about ideas and approaches that the FBI have seen working for other companies and giving us guidance like that. So that kind of stuff has been brilliant.
Absolutely.
And then ultimately, as you mentioned, right, you don't want your hair to be on fire, to be the first time you're having an introduction with someone. And another thing, doing business with embargoed countries and stuff, I called Elvis just the other week and I'm like, hey, we got this scenario. What do you think? Any advice? And then from there, I could act upon that and make sure I'm giving guidance back to the team at Banyan. So I think there's not just like when shit hits the fan, the FBI might want to help. I mean, it's
For sure.
if you can build a relationship, you're going to get way more value.
And we participate in TTXs all the time with local companies. I mean, that's definitely a very helpful. I find it helpful because it gives me an understanding of how various different, company and corporate structures work and how their security apparatus works. But it lets you get those reps in, right? How are we going to handle this situation, and when do we bring in the FBI if we choose to do so? So TTX is definitely another way to do it.
Awesome. So there's your local FBI office. Yeah. Otherwise, there is a website, right, that people can go and get more information.
Sure. I mean, well, if you're just looking for general information or best practices, is that what you're getting at?
Well, there could be that, and then there could be how do you get the number for your local or the contact at your local.
Oh, I mean, gosh, you can just Google. That's pretty easy to find. It's just Google. Like if you wanted the San Francisco FBI's office, you just Google San Francisco FBI, and you'll find the main number. And then you'd want to tell them who you are, and ask that you're looking to talk to whoever is in charge of their cyber program. Right. And that is just a pretty easy way to initiate that relationship, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. And I even think there's a 1-800 call FBI, right?
There is. That's more of a tip line, I think, that goes to the in-talk. But you could certainly do that for sure.
Yeah. You could give them a tip. Hey, I need help. So excellent. Hey, Scott, look, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time. We actually managed to go way over what I was thinking.
Sorry.
But it's great conversation. I'm sure there will be people out there that will find this really valuable. And thank you very much for your time, Scott. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Den. And I actually forgot to ask you, if you're in the Bay Area, looking forward to running into you at some point.
Yeah, I'm in San Jose. So and then our office is in San Francisco, so I go between the two places.
Sure.
And then, as I mentioned, I've got a really crazy travel schedule. I done a LinkedIn post this week to say, hey, where's Waldo? Because I'll be talking at 7 conferences in 12 weeks.
Oh my gosh, you're going to be all over.
Yeah, I start off hitting Dallas on Wednesday, and then it just goes from there. So
if you're down close to us, we're just in the prune yard. So if you want to, you happen to be around, we'll meet up for a coffee.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll definitely drop you a line. Well, Scott, thank you very much. Let me end this recording, and then I can start swearing like a Scottish guy.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about Banyan Security and find future episodes of the podcast, please visit us at banyansecurity.io. Special thanks to Urban Punks for providing the music for this episode. You can find their track Summer Silk and all their music at urbanpunks.com.